at the National Civil Rights Museum, and we care about all things related to human rights and social justice. We are particularly focused on 3 pillars: education, arts and culture, and economic empowerment. So what I just said is not just from a marketing or advertising standpoint. It's about the work that we're trying to do here every single day, in addition to people experiencing what we think is a pretty special place physically in the museum. It's also about the spirit of those three things intersecting all day, every day, and being explicit about what we do and why we do it. Another organization that is explicit about what it does and why it does it is the Community Foundation. The Community Foundation has long been important in this community, but let me just say, its leader, Bob Faulkner, has stepped up and centered himself and the organization smack in the middle of this community when we've needed it most. Let's give our hand. But we also know that Bob Faulkner doesn't do it by himself at the Community Foundation. He has an amazing staff, tremendous staff. I'm honored to be a board member at the Community Foundation, and I watch the work they do every day. They are serious about making sure investments in this community are done with fidelity and done through an equitable lens and done with a spirit of sustainability. And that's what it takes for us to reach our full potential. I need to get out of the way because you got some panelists here, but I couldn't resist just capturing the moment and the spirit I feel in this room about this topic. Thank you all for being here. This place is built for things like this, and we're so honored to be able to host this event tonight. Thank you so much.
Good evening. I know y'all didn't just do that. Good evening. I know y'all been to the church house. Y'all saying good evening. Come on now. Hi, hello. My name is Anasa Troutman, and I am the Executive Director of Historic Claiborne Temple and the founder and director of the Big We Foundation. I am feeling a lot of gratitude right now. I'm really, really excited about this conversation. So before we even get started, I want to thank the Community Foundation. I want to thank Russ and the museum. But more than that, I want to thank Robert Church, who is the person who I think about when I think of Black philanthropy in Memphis. If you don't know who that is, then I want you to have a homework assignment and call me in the morning and let me know who he is. But I also think about all the countless grandmothers and grandfathers and aunties who have doled out dollar after dollar after dollar after dollar that they may not have been able to afford, that also are the founders of Black philanthropy in Memphis. I want to make sure that you know, it's funny, when I was driving here, I was thinking, like, the people who are coming tonight, I wonder what image comes in their head when they think about the phrase Black philanthropy. And I feel like for some folks, it's not somebody's grandmama. But I want y'all to know that Black folks give more of their household income percentage-wise than anyone else in the country. More than white folks and other non-Black folks, 25% more. So philanthropy is deep in our bones, it's deep in our spiritual and social practice. It's kind of what we do, right? Whether it's $1 you give at church, or the money you send to your niece because she's not making it, or the $1 million check you write to be able to build a building like this, right? So I want us to go into this conversation understanding that even those of us who walk in the door not thinking of ourselves as philanthropists, Black philanthropy is alive in you, it's alive in your lineage, in your ancestry, and in the folks who will come after you. So just keep that in your heart as we go through the night tonight, please. I want to say to you also, I was just talking to Rychetta before, right? And you'll meet all these wonderful, wonderful people in a moment. And I said to her, I have something controversial to say. And she said, what is it? And I said, well, if it's true that black folks give 25% more of their money than anybody else in the country, and this isn't really a conversation about philanthropy, it's a conversation about access to capital, right? And the history of the intersection of race and class in our communities. And the fact, I don't have to say the rest, y'all know the rest, right? You could write a dissertation on it, right? And she said, are we teaching a graduate seminar? and we're not. We're having a 45-minute conversation. So when our time is done tonight, our conversation won't be done, and you will be wanting more, and we will be wanting more. And so my hope is that this is the beginning of something, and that y'all don't feel like you're gonna walk out with all the answers, right? I asked a friend of mine in the audience, like, what do you want to get out tonight? And she said, I want to know how we're gonna get there, right? I think that's what we all want to know. How are we gonna get there? And y'all know where there is, right? You can feel it even if you can't say it. I'm getting emotional. I knew it. Anyway, so the last thing I want to say before everyone introduces themselves is that it's important to me that you also know that this month, this year, Black Philanthropy Month, which we are celebrating today, the theme of Black Philanthropy Month in 2023 is love in action. Yeah, love in action. And it's inspired by Bell Hooks and her work, so it's another homework assignment for you. If you haven't read Bell Hooks, go home and buy it from a black bookstore, okay? Okay, very good. All right, so I would like to introduce you to my panelists, or I'll give them a chance to introduce themselves because they can speak for themselves. If y'all wouldn't mind telling the folks who you are and what you're doing here. Besides saving your world. Yes, please.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Rychetta Watkins. I am the Director of Grant Making and Partnerships for Memphis Music Initiative. I've been doing that for about 4 years. Before that, I did work with capacity building. That's how I got into philanthropy. I consider myself an accidental philanthropist. And so in working with organizations with hope and trial strategies and with the city of Memphis to do capacity building, that's where I learned about the different forms of capacity. And I also want to call the name of my ancestor, my father, Richard Eldridge Watkins. Today would have been his 82nd birthday. And when I think about philanthropy, I think about him. Because a big part of philanthropy is legacy, how you live your life in order to love on other people. And it became so apparent after he passed how much he loved us because of what he left for us, what he built for us. And so, he inspires me every day, but especially today.
Well, good evening. My name is Shante Avant, and I am the President and CEO of the Women's Foundation for Greater Memphis, as well as County Commissioner for District 5, which is Cordova. So I'm excited to be here today as a native Memphian who has a deep, deep love for this city, not only the city, but the people in the city. And because of that love, my journey probably is a little different than some folks. Starting out as a practitioner early on in my career, it really was, how do you help people, right? And it's the ways that you help people in your job or in your community or through your family. That was really my journey. Always as a youth development director is how I started out at Boys and Girls Club in South Memphis. And it's a really full circle moment for me now. as president of the Women's Foundation, because so much of our work and our philanthropy is focused in a place-based strategy in South Memphis. So to be 23 or 24 years old, thinking that I could save the world, I've now found a path of how I see that really happening through philanthropy. So it has been a really great journey for me to think about the ways that I can continue to support Memphis, support the people in Memphis, but more importantly, how I help others think about the ways that they can support the people of Memphis.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Brandon Arrindell. I'm a senior analyst and principal at Southeastern Asset Management. Grew up here in Memphis, went away to Harvard for college, and came back for a career opportunity, but also was very excited about the opportunity to just be a part of the growth story and be a part of Memphis's, the path of reaching our potential. I come at this conversation and the topic of philanthropy from the perspective of an engaged member of the community who believes in the power of philanthropy and the need of philanthropy to transform communities, but by no means am I nearly as immersed in this topic as my fellow panelists here, so not an expert, but happy and really honored to be here with you all and share my perspective.
Shante, I would love to start with you. I think what you described, kind of your path, your life path, a lot of folks who are in philanthropy who are, hold on 1 second, I have something to tell y'all. We talked a lot about this before we came to y'all, and we had a couple paths that we can go through, and I want to make sure that y'all are clear that there are 2 conversations we're going to have tonight because we couldn't choose, because they're both very important right now. The first conversation is actually about Black philanthropists, folks who are giving of their money, of their time, of their treasures, right? We all are expecting that. The other conversation that we're going to have tonight is about how you give to Black communities in a way that feels healthy and loving and joyful and abundant, yeah? We cannot leave here without having that too. So we're going to have both. So bear with us, it's going to be fine. I got you. Back to you, Shante. I feel like a lot of folks come to philanthropy the way that you did, in terms of like starting as a practitioner, like leading with your time and your brilliance, and then being like, ding, 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 there's something more. And I wish that you could talk to us about why philanthropy, why you chose that path as the way that you would give and love community.
Sure. If I could, I'd start with, there's a book called Giving Back, which is a tribute to generations of African American philanthropists. So this book is a collection of stories about Black philanthropy, pictures of people who have given and done. And there was one particular quote in the book that I think sums up how I started.
Yeah.
So this is a quote by a woman named Jennifer Henderson. She's a board member of the Sweet Beginnings, a social enterprise that provides transitional jobs and support to formerly incarcerated men and women. But her quote is this: when I was 5 years old, sitting in a church and clutching my $2 offering, I asked my mother why God, who has control over everything, needed my money. She told me the answer that shapes my giving to this day. God needs your money for his earth operations. He looks to us to be his team on earth. He's counting on us. I have never forgotten that brief yet pivotal conversation. So I think that's for me how I started. It literally started with my family and what we all saw as our role in making the community better. So my role in service really helped me understand a great deal about a lot of the very specific root causes that you see Black people, specifically Black people who are living in poverty in Memphis. You see that firsthand working in the industries that I did, first at the Boys and Girls Club and then at Girl Scouts. And it was very interesting. I kind of happenstance into philanthropy that the former president and CEO of the Women's Foundation came up to me in my early 30s and said, "You're going to work for me." And I said, "Really?" She was like, "Yeah." So maybe 2 months later I did. So 16 years later, here I am, thinking about the work really from the intersection of who needs that those programs and those services and how philanthropy could really make a difference in the lives of the people that we're serving. And so my service has taken a few different turns. Once as a practitioner and now as leading a philanthropic organization that's really focused on supporting low-income women and children. But I also saw my role even from the legislative side. I ran for school board when my daughter was in kindergarten because I really wanted to see how I could support these systems that are impacting children. Served on the school board for 8 years, and I've been a county commissioner for the last year. But it really was for me to think about, not only are we thinking about the people that are most approximate to the problems, that they are the authors of their solutions, but how resources, with the right resources directed towards them, could really make a difference. And so from a legislative side, I saw the impact that I could make, but also from a resource generating side, really understanding a lot of the great needs that have happened because of my career in service. So that's a journey.
Brandon, if you don't mind, I'd like to come to you next because I think another pathway that folks have is folks who are coming from finance. Because you have proximity, you see what capital can do, and you also have the heart that tells you what to do with it. And I'd love to hear a little bit about your story and what you're building.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's a person in finance. It's definitely been interesting over the past year or so seeing Robert Smith become a household name, the richest, wealthiest Black American, and came to a lot of prominence after announcing during his Morehouse commencement speech that he was going to pay off those grad students' debt. So I think that's been a lot of highlighted to a great deal the power of concentrated sources of capital and the ability to drive change through that. I am very fortunate to have two mentors here at Southeastern in Memphis and Southeastern Asset Management, Staley Cates and Mason Hawkins, who are not only great investors, but are also great humans, great people who are committed to Memphis and are using their resources to help those of us who are most disadvantaged. And I came to Memphis. I was in New York for a couple of years, came back to Memphis, knowing that I get a first-class education in investing, but didn't realize I also have an opportunity to use a career in investing to drive change. And I'll kind of provide some detail around that in a quick story. But so going back to it's early 2020, right around the time of the George Floyd murder, and amidst the conversation about racial equity in the country, Mayor Harris's office, really led by Teal Crosby at the time, who was the chief financial officer, decided they wanted to do something about the inequitable allocation of the pension assets. So they wanted to allocate more of the city's pension assets to local Black-owned investment firms. And quite frankly, there just aren't that many nationally and even less locally. We're very fortunate here in Memphis to have Preserver Partners, who's been around since 2009. Rest in peace to Floyd Tyler, another great human, he was a great investor, great person. And shout out to Dana Pointer for continuing that legacy and taking that firm into its next chapter. But there aren't that many nationally and aren't that many locally, and just kind of get some stats around that. The U.S. asset management industry is around $82 trillion in assets under management, and less than 1.4% of that is managed by diverse-owned firms, with diversity defined by race and by gender. And so if you strip out the vast majority of that is white women, Black people are a fraction of that 1.4%. And this is an industry, again, that $82 trillion produces over $100 billion annually in cash flow, and those firms collectively are worth over $1 trillion. So clearly, high concentration of wealth that Black people have been excluded from for a number of reasons, structural and otherwise. But the office, with Teal Crosby and Mayor Harris, decided that they wanted to be proactive about finding a solution. So they approached Southeastern with the idea of partnering to create a Black-owned firm that I would helm. And fortunately, the leadership at Southeastern was not only willing to engage in that conversation, but was excited about finding a solution and finding a way to make it work. So we iterated on structure and strategy, and ultimately arrived at an arrangement by which I am the 51% owner of the firm. The county would be seeding client, so they didn't provide capital. The county County was the seeding client, and Southeastern Asset Management is the 49% owner and providing all the back office support. But importantly, and this is the key point here, that 49% stake that Southeastern holds has been committed 100% to nonprofits that support under-resourced communities in here in Memphis. That effectively means Black communities. And so it's just really, really exciting to be able to use what the firm is now named Greenwood Pine in homage to Black Wall Street, the Greenwood District of Tulsa. But it's really very, I'm honored to be able to use that vehicle to support nonprofits. We launched in 2021, so our first full year was last year, and we selected 2 organizations to partner with, both of which are now Black-led organizations. The Collective Blueprint, led by Sarah Slocker-Steppel, great organization working on in the workforce development and workforce readiness space, and taking opportunity youth and providing them with the pathway to get to a living wage career. And Reach Memphis, also now a newly Black-led organization led by Tiffany Morrow-Smith, that focuses on providing exposure to elite universities and boarding schools, and providing college counseling to really educated and gifted Black youth here, primarily Black youth here in the city. So yeah, very excited to have this vehicle, and having that as an incremental motivation. I love my job, I love finding stocks, and that itself is motivating, but the incremental motivation of knowing that I have the power to have the impact is really driving me.
Awesome, thank you. Can I talk to you for a minute? So, for y'all who know me, y'all know that in 2020, I got real mad. Because I was looking around and I was like, the people who are making decisions about philanthropy, I do not agree with these decisions. And I was like, what would it look like for me to be in charge of these decisions? And so, in 2020, in the middle of a pandemic, I started a foundation. Because I wanted to be the one to say yes, and I wanted to be the one to say no. And I feel like there are a lot of folks who don't have access to scale philanthropy, but have access and proximity to community and understand the decisions that should, could, and would be made had they had access. And so there's a rise in philanthropic intermediaries and organizations who are bringing money together and directing them in a particular strategic way. And I want to hear about your work at MMI, and I want to hear about the things that are amazing and fun and exciting, and the things that are frustrating and hard about being a philanthropic intermediary.
45 minutes, right? So, Memphis Music Initiative, as she mentioned, is an intermediary, which the way I explained it is we are funded to fund. And we have 2 direct run programs. We have an in-schools program, and so through that in-schools program over the last 10 years, we've invested about, I believe it's about $11+ million through our in-schools program with mostly Shelby County schools, but also some charter schools. We also have a high school internship program where several hundred young people have been introduced to, 1, the idea of being a creative, and 2, creative careers here in the community. And then we have our grant making, where we made our first active grants in 2016. And since 2016, we have pushed out over $3 million to community, mostly grassroots, community-based arts, music-forward organizations that are engaging young people. They're Black and brown led, and they're engaging young people through music education and music engagement and exposure. But MMI was started as a strategy to address the fact that, because of budget cuts, because of changes in how we fund education, we were eroding the pathway to music careers and music development for young Black and brown people here in Memphis. And how is that possible? When we have given our music to the world. And then we would have adequate pathways for young people to access their patrimony here in Memphis, access that heritage. And so we were founded to address that impending tragedy. And the strategy is meant to be kind of all-encompassing, right? So we're working in schools to shore up what had been cut in schools and create another model of funding that work in schools that hopefully will be cheaper or will be more efficient, I should say, to use some of that financial language, more efficient and thereby more sustainable. And then introducing young people to those careers so that they can go into do I want to be a teacher? Do I want to run an organization? Do I want to own a business that is centered around arts and creativity? And then for the organizations who are doing the work in the community, because what we found is that it's in the community-based music programs where young people can progress their talent. So usually when you go to school, there aren't enough classes and assets at the school in order for them to go from being a novice to being a really high level performing student. And so it's in those community-based programs or in the band sometimes, but even more so in the community-based programs where they get, they're able to learn an instrument, develop a talent, and then really push their passion for it, right? So so in terms of the frustrations, to us it seems clear, right? It all works together. It's not just point A and point B, there's a connection there. But people are always like, well, what do you do again? So that's one of the big frustrations, people's, confusion about what we are trying to do. And so they say, well, we can't fund you because you're a direct fund program. But we're doing all this work over here where we're supporting other programs. Oh, well, we can't fund you because then you're going to give the money away. Exactly. Because we have to support these programs that are doing the work. Because the programs that we support who are doing the work, look, it's one person. That's right. And that one person, even though that one person is running that organization with a handful of volunteers and they're reaching 100 young people in South Memphis, so-and-so at Ford and Mellon and Kresge and fill in the blank, they are not going to see that one person. But the idea is they'll see us because we represent 20 or 30 of those one people. And we can rise above the fray and say, hey, there is a collective body of work going on here in Memphis. And so the other frustration is most of our support comes from outside of Memphis. The vast majority of our support comes from outside of Memphis. Now we have amazing partners like the Hyde Family Foundation, but most of our support comes from outside of Memphis. And why is that when we are trying to preserve Memphis's heritage? So I think that at the end of the day, what is amazing, starting with the challenges first, right? This confusion about what you're doing. Most of our support coming from outside of Memphis. And also the challenge, and this is what we signed up for, right? We're suited up to go out and get lots of money. So we got to get lots of money. We need, 5-figure checks are great. They're great. But we have to go out and get 7- and 8-figure checks in order to do the work that we're doing. And that's tough. It's tough to get the 5-figure check. So just imagine what it's like to get the 7- and 8-figure check. So those are challenges, but what are the joys of it? The joys of it are going to Memphis Jazz Workshop's concert and seeing that young man who did not have a saxophone 6 months ago play like a virtuoso under the tutelage of Steve Lee. And know that we had a small part. Because hear me when I say, it's in Steve Lee's blood. And if we weren't there, he'd be doing it. He'd probably be divorced and penniless. Now, Shante knows Steve had known him since college, and he probably would be divorced because his wife was like, I didn't sign up for this. But he would be doing it because that is his passion. It really is the reason that he's on this earth. to introduce jazz to young people and light a fire in them. We do it so that Michelle and Carl Johnson can do lessons out of Metropolitan and teach decades of young people, introducing them to stringed instruments and symphonic music. And when you walk into that gym at Metropolitan and you hear those squeaks, but you know that a lifelong passion for music and the arts is being ignited. Will they ever appear on Carnegie Hall stage? Probably not. But for the rest of their lives, they will appreciate music in a different way. So that is the joy at the end of the day of being able to do this music, do this work.
Just jump in for 1 second. Yeah. This is also the beauty of Memphis because like 5 people she stated in her speech are people I know personally. So I think there's something to be said also about that type of connection that we have here in Memphis. I mean, we're a big enough city that, you know, people can come and see the things that we do, but it's the very real connections that we have that I appreciate. Part of this philanthropic journey is really the great people that you get to meet who are highly invested in the success of Memphis. And so I just appreciate like hearing that and knowing that, you know, the people that go to Metropolitan Church that have this phenomenal music program, you know, they've been there for decades and decades and decades. Now that they're giving back, it's just another way that philanthropy is, you know, realized. So thank you.
I'm going to ask you to keep talking, Shante, because I want to focus on this conversation about community, this connection to community, and the connection between Black philanthropy and Black-led philanthropy and Black community. And I would love for you to talk a little bit about the commitment that the Women's Foundation made to 38126 a few years ago, and why you made that decision, and what you have learned in the time since about giving from a perspective through the lens of Black philanthropy to a Black community.
So the theme tonight, Love in Action,
Right.
is a great way to describe, I think, why we made the decision to boldly say we were going to reduce poverty in the poorest zip code in the city of Memphis. So zip code 38126, which is, you know, skipping a jump from where we are, at the time that we made the decision to, you know, really have this vision for Memphis. We called it Vision 2020, and we launched in 2015. The poorest zip code in the city of Memphis, if you can imagine, a family of 4 living off an annual income of about $8,600. So it's shocking, it's breathtaking to think that people live in abject poverty in a city like Memphis. We see it sometimes, but you're usually riding through it. You're not there, right? It's something you see or you hear on the news reels, but you don't really live it or feel it. So our board, with great leadership, made a decision for us to say, how do we support people who have had so much disinvestment for decades? Because you think about all the things that have grown up around a 38126. FedEx Forum sits in the middle of the 38126. So all of this disinvestment has happened for decades around people who systematically have been overlooked. And our decision to reduce poverty in this zip code was really focused on, there's so many assets right in 38126. Memorial College is in 38126. We have all of these historic churches that are in 38126. So we really thought about it from an asset of this community, and if they had the resources, they could be empowered really to create opportunities for themselves and their families. And most of these are women of color. These are Black women, and they are single heads of household. And so that really is the work of the foundation. We are a philanthropic organization focused on supporting low-income women and children. And what better way for us to live out our mission than to really take on this really big and bold challenge of reducing poverty in 38126. Well, here we are, 7-8 years later, in the middle of a pandemic that's happened, and lots of circumstances, but we've made great gains, great gains. And so we're committed to supporting through 8126, but we've learned so much about really how are you empowering the community to make these decisions. It should not be from a patriarchal decision frame or scope, but it really should be thinking about how do you provide the resources to the people who are the most approximate to those problems, because they are the best authors of their solutions. But they have been disinvested and they've had lack of resources to get them there. And so providing job training and high school, making sure that folks have a high school diploma, really a focus on early education, because we know the gains if you're focusing on educating our kids early. Job placement, youth development, and then financial literacy, thinking about the ways that you really can train folks. So those are some of the ways that we've worked and supported. We've invested about $7.1 million into the work in 38126, and we're making change. We've seen the redevelopment that's happened around. We couldn't have done that without really a very strategic public-private partnership. It's great to see some of the folks, R.T. Willis, who's been in this journey with us from the very beginning. We created a public-private partnership with the City of Memphis and Memphis Housing Authority, and brought people together who are really focused on our strategy. And if you drive now through 38126, you see a community that is mixed income, it's mixed use. And it's people who deserved that type of investment. And we've kind of put our stake in the ground. We're not going anywhere because there are many more folks who need to be able to benefit from things that have been inequitably privy to this point. So.
It wasn't the case at the time, but now the revitalization of historic Quaker Temple is always in 38126 also. So thank you for your service. And I'm wondering, like, if you turned into Hermione real quick and you had a magic wand, what's the one thing that you would do to make all of your work so much more impactful and powerful and pervasive? I want to start with you, Brandon.
It's a great question.
Thanks.
One thing I would do, I think it's largely part of the focus of this conversation is just the ability to scale the impact through capital and to get the message. So I see this, and certainly with Greenwood Hine, my firm, it is incredibly challenging to raise capital, period, and certainly more so as an African American. I think holding all other variables constant, that holds true as well in the philanthropic world. And so if there's one message I could convey, maybe not less of a thing I would do, one message I would convey is just the importance of giving equitably, and that's really across all demographics, Black philanthropists, white philanthropists, regardless. There's African Americans comprise 13% of the U.S. population. I don't know the stats, maybe you all do, but I imagine well under 13% of philanthropic dollars go towards Black-led organizations. Here locally, we're in a city where it's 65% African American, and I'm pretty certain that well less than that percentage goes to Black-led organizations. So there's one, not necessarily thing I can do, but one message I would convey is just as philanthropists, as members of the community, to really be focused on giving equitably and have a conscious awareness of the demographic profiles of the nonprofits that you all are supporting.
Thank you, Shante.
I think my magic wand, there's a lot that I would do with my magic wand. I think the message for me would be to people in the audience across racial, ethnic backgrounds is trust. Yeah, so I think it's trusting the work that people are doing, trusting the expertise that people who are Black-led organizations bring to the work, trusting the process, And it's not trust and verify, it's just trust. It's just trust.
Y'all hear that?
It's people who have been doing this work for decades, who are highly invested in the success of the people that they're serving. And I think that's one of the ways the Women's Foundation has been successful, like MMI, is that we are really serving organizations and promoting capacity of organizations who would not be seen by a lot of large donors in this community. But that's why you give to us, because we have built those really authentic relationships with the people who are running these organizations, so that we are verifying for you. You don't need to trust and verify, just trust that the work is being done, and that the people who are leading these organizations, who have the expertise, are most poised to get to the results that we're trying to achieve.
I was trying to find the statistics for you, Brandon. We did a study actually in 2017 where we looked at that for the arts, and I don't have it in my head, but I'll get it for you. But needless to say, the number is nowhere near commensurate with the percentage of Black folks in the population here in Memphis. But what would I do? We have been a part of the More for Memphis project over the last year and a half or so. And a big reason we wanted to do that was so that we could get a better understanding of the data around the arts and culture sector in Memphis, and also have the opportunity to speak to Black creatives, collect their voices, and better understand what they needed. And so we've done a lot of qualitative and quantitative work and analysis in order to try and give us an early picture of what those folks are saying that they need. And what it really boils down to, if I had the magic wand, in addition to a $100 million endowment, I would wave my wand for an endowment for capital projects, because our city needs more arts and cultural assets in neighborhoods. That is what citizens are asking for. That is what we are working with, the organizations that we are working with, again, are doing that work in communities, but they need facilities. Like, not everybody is fortunate as an harmonic South String Orchestra to have such a great partner as Metropolitan, because not only does Metropolitan give them a place, an office space that they can stay in, they don't have to pack up and move away every time they finish. They also give them access to their bus, their church bus, for transportation. And that's crucial. Everybody in here who has done any kind of program work with a nonprofit knows that transportation, I see people shaking their head, yeah. Transportation is a huge issue, and so that's a game changer for them. But to have a facility it allows for exponential impact and exponential growth. I point to YAG, the Young Actors Guild, which just finished the second phase of their renovation. That's 2 phases in basically 2.5 years. Their first phase, y'all, was self-funded. So anybody in here that's sitting on a pot of money, you need to examine yourself. That this organization that is reaching hundreds of young people across Memphis and North Mississippi had to self-fund the first phase of their renovation. They got the firehouse from the city of Memphis. They worked concessions at Grizzlies games. And said, Tiffany's shaking her head because she knows. They worked for, 2.5 years? They worked concessions at Grizzlies games to save the money, but they couldn't get a bank to approve them, couldn't get any of the foundations in this city to give them capital for this. Within a couple of months after they opened that new facility at capacity. Second stage, we went in, we were the first dollars in on their second stage renovation. They managed to get about 4 other funders, including Arts Memphis, to come in on that second phase. As soon as they finished it, guess what? at capacity again. They are now planning their third phase of renovation of this building. It is now a bright light in that community. They say this building used to be dedicated to putting out fires. Now we are igniting fires. That's what Capital can do. That center stands at the corner of Lamar, Pendleton, and Airways. I grew up 5 minutes from there. And that, we had apartment buildings that were ringing that area. The city of Memphis had pulled out and built another fire station down the street, down Airways, and it was blighted. It was the very definition of blighted. But that center is anchoring a turnaround. That ain't buried by Bernard's because that funeral home is right there. Anyway, so is a turnaround. I mean, it's my hood, I know it. So is a turnaround for that neighborhood. That can happen in so many other neighborhoods around Memphis, and it's prime. The Willis is working on not only Northside High School, but also the Boys and Girls Club, the old Porter Boys and Girls Club. They have plans for that as well. We could do something like that in so many neighborhoods across Memphis, and it would be a game changer. But capital funds are the hardest funds to raise, period. And if you're a Black-led organization, it's exponentially harder. Anasa knows.
I sure do.
She lost a lot of nights sleep trying to do the same thing for the historic Claiborne Temple. So if I had that magic wand, in addition to the endowment, that capital fund is a game changer.
I want to take a pause and do two things. One, I want to underscore what Rychetta is saying, because if I was going to answer this question and nobody asked me, but me, I would say two things. And one of them is what Rychetta is saying, is that it would be really powerful if folks who are in philanthropy, who also have endowments that are being invested in other things, like oil and private prisons and other things, right? And also sometimes have their own money to invest, right? If we could expand the idea of philanthropy to be integrated capital that included free money that you give away, low-cost patient loans, and investment dollars, and land, and buses, and all the other things that you need, because what we're talking about, if we're talking about alleviating, see, I'm about to go on the soapbox, hey, if we're talking about alleviating poverty, then we have to be having a conversation about community wealth building. And you cannot build wealth by getting donations. You cannot build wealth by getting donations. So you want to make sure that kids stay warm and have lunch and have saxophones, then we can do philanthropy all day long. If you want to alleviate poverty in Memphis and in the world, then we have to be talking about more than philanthropy. Okay? That's what she was saying. The second thing is, the other thing that I would say, answer to that question, is that I would expand people's hearts so that they were giving with space for people to fail. Because the thing that we're asking folks to do with these dollars is something that literally has never happened before on planet Earth, right? It's never happened before in Memphis. We're like, hey, see all this? Fix it. And we give them $50,000 a year, make them write 20,000-page reports, and then the real metric is like, well, how many kids got on your bus? Yeah? And if you don't have enough kids, or if you tried something and it didn't work, but you learned a lot and you have something new to try, you don't get any more money. But if I was a person of a certain age, hue, and gender, and wore khaki pants and lived in Silicon Valley, I can get $10 million and be like, damn, I messed that up. Can I get another 20? And you'll be like, yeah, come on, right? So like we have to create room for people to try things, to experiment, to iterate, to innovate, and to fail. And know that it is okay if we fail as long as we're in community and we are all learning together. Yes? I have a couple more questions for y'all, but I want to open the floor up to you all and acknowledge your presence and your own brilliance and your curiosity And so I wonder if anyone out there has any questions or any enlightened things to share with us tonight. If not, it's no pressure. We've got a lot more to say. Yes.
Hi, I'm Dr. Keith D. Lee, and I agree with what you're saying, but also that magic fund, it has to be funds for operations.
Amen.
Everybody wants to fund the program, but don't want to fund the staffing that goes with that.
Amen.
And that's a separate fund than the capital fund.
So I want to make sure that everybody heard what Keith said. That was a brilliant point. Is the point that he is making is that for folks who are not running nonprofits and raising money, it is very difficult to get money just to run your operation. Philanthropists often want to fund programs, they want to fund the cool stuff, the sexy stuff, they want to take a picture with the kids, but you're like, but I gotta have admin. I gotta have a development professional. I gotta have an operations person, because I'm really good at ideas, but I suck at QuickBooks. What am I gonna do? But it's really, really, really hard to get money just to run what you're doing. And everybody knows that if you have a vision, you've got to have something under it to be able to make it fly. So that was a brilliant point. Thank you, Dr. Keith Lee.
Yeah, and I do want to just underscore that MMI gives its money is unrestricted.
That's
and
right.
so that's my frame
That's
already. So our money is unrestricted.
Yes, please.
Good evening. My name's Felicia Pete, and I wanted to know, because even when looking for funding, I have come across the where I see the people that give the funding, they have certain people that they give to, and they don't open up their funding to new people. So I just wanted to know a little bit about that, or their funding is so hidden, you have to dig so deep. You go to their website, it's not there. It's, you know, they say it's open, and then it's like, okay, where is it? So I'm just trying to find out, and that's what most of the funding here in the city of Memphis. You talk about most of it is outside of Memphis, but the funding that's here in Memphis is so hard to find, and it's so hard to get through unless you already know somebody that's already a part of that organization. So I'm just sort of a little frustrated about that, and just wanted to know what were your thoughts, or how do we overcome that?
So one of the challenges of philanthropy is a lot of us are bound by our strategies. My good friend Tasha Downey put it yesterday, we got these handcuffs. They might be gold and platinum sometimes, but they're still handcuffs. So generally, when you give your money, as Shante mentioned, 38126, that's a strategy, right? We have a strategy where we are targeting Black and Brown-led, community-based, music-forward organizations. And if you don't fit in that strategy, then that's not where our funding goes. And so the vast majority of funders do give through some type of strategy, and that can be a benefit because it can target the funds, it can help you increase impact, but it can also be a hindrance because then it makes you a little bit less nimble in some ways. As Anasa mentioned, being an intermediary, our cycle for turnaround can be a little bit shorter. Because we don't have to deal with a board of trustees in the same way that my good friend Rachel might as well, but Rachel not have to deal with, but still they're there.
Well, one thing that I would always encourage people as they're starting new organizations is think about if there's already an organization that's doing that. Because so often people say, well, I really need to start this, I'm really passionate about this program, I'm going to start a nonprofit. That's more than a notion, starting a nonprofit. So with scarcity of resources, I often ask people to think about it in a few different ways. Is there an organization that's already doing this work and doing it well? Geographically, are they covering or supporting a greater number of people? And is there good leadership that you could maybe partner with or support? So I never tell people to go out and start another nonprofit. Memphis is one of the most charitable cities, and we have the most nonprofits. They're everywhere, for everything. I broke my pinky toe. There is a nonprofit for it. But so that usually is where I tell people to start. But then there are organizations like the Women's Foundation and others that are always looking for partners who are doing work well. And oftentimes it's a belief in the leadership, so don't give up on that. It's just really finding the right niche.
I just wanted to, hi, Camille Fryer, I'm the Executive Director of Memphis. It's nice to be here this evening. I wanted to expound upon a point that Anasa made, because this year I was lucky enough to be chosen on a national panel where we had to, as a group, decide and rank other groups that were applying for funding. And one group in particular, they had been around for a few years, but they were really trying for this really brand new initiative. And there, as you can imagine, if it's a new initiative, there are not stats, right? There's no measure to say like how successful it was. But it was such a very well thought out and such a very well detailed program. And it would have reached so many people in a really rough part of town in the state that they were in. And so initially, most of us, we didn't give them the lowest ranking, but we didn't give them as high as another group that has like this really well-known name and everything. And it took one person, and she was like, actually, no. We're here to give the little guy a chance. They might fail, and that's okay. Because if we align with what they're trying to do, if we align with their metrics, if we see the vision, then maybe they can come back next year and say, hey, we figured out X, Y, and Z did not work, so this year we're trying for A, B, and C. It's those people that we're fighting for, and those people should be the ones that get to benefit this funding, not necessarily the ones that have Hollywood stars, right, on the red carpet and everything like that. So I just wanted to say that on a national scale, those conversations are happening and those chances are being taken, and I would love to see more of that here in our local community. Thank you.
Did you mention that you're the executive director of Indie Memphis? You did? Oh. It was so exciting. Yes, ma'am. You look real cute, by the way.
I'm Cherie Wells, and I'm on the board for the Christian Community Foundation. And I know that we talked about how there's so much Black philanthropy across the nation. And you said that the grandmothers and the grandfathers have been putting their dimes and quarters and dollars in churches and in colleges. But how does Black philanthropy get its dollars, like you said, put it all together so that it's directed for kingdom building? When people are interested in building the Lord's kingdom, how does that work in Black philanthropy? Thank you. And I loved trust, but not verify. I love that.
David, I wonder if you could speak to that, because you think a lot about accumulating and building wealth. I wonder if you have anything to say about that.
I think one of the, and this highlights something I've thought a lot about, just the power of Black philanthropy, and a challenge that I would kind of issue to Black philanthropists. And then Rychetta, I don't know if you would have this stat eventually, but I'm very curious as it relates to the percentage of philanthropic dollars from Black donors that go to Black-led organizations. And I ask that because my hunch in my thesis here, which might not be confirmed, is that because there are Black people are a blessed proximity to wealth and do not have the same access to capital that other demographics do. Black philanthropists often use philanthropy as a tool to build social status, quite frankly. and as a result can end up in overfunding high-profile organizations that are doing great work, don't get me wrong, but high-profile organizations that might have powerful boards or just give them access to powerful people in the community and are doing great work, but nonetheless, kind of to the point about the need of and power for intermediaries, they don't have that lived experience that informs the programs and that informs the approach they're taking. So no matter how well-intentioned or academically sound that approach these organizations take, they might not be as effective. Long-winded way of not answering your question correctly. But I do think it ultimately does come down to finding the appropriate intermediaries who do have that relevant lived experience, or who at the very least are engaging community members and stakeholders who do have that lived experiences and are intimately familiar with the struggles, to use those intermediaries as a vehicle to give. So whether that's all of us decided collectively that we're going to support one of these esteemed panelists and have them direct our funds given the experiences they have, but ultimately it is a matter of collectively using our resources to affect change.
Hello.
Oh, hi.
Hi, my name is Tanika Cecily. I am the executive of Apple Seeds. We're a community mental health organization. And I want you to understand where my heart is with St. Jude and how any child that has any illness, there is no bill. No bill for that family. And that is absolutely phenomenal. Phenomenal. And the founders and organizations that's here that also give to St. Jude, and to my knowledge, St. Jude is in the black for years to come. So how do our local funders know that we exist? Am I all for, do you all see where I'm getting at, what I'm talking about?
Yes.
That there are organizations here in this community, and we're grateful for what happens if you have a sick child. It is beyond belief or anything that you can imagine to have that burden on you. They're good. They're good, and for years to come. So the funders here, do they know about these local organizations, and how do we get to them? And is there any way that they can split it up or divide it up or something?
I think that we need to be honest about the fact that fundraising is really marketing and branding, right? So the larger your brand, the bigger your list, the better your party, the more money you can raise, right? Because at the end of the day, y'all always gotta be the one to say stuff. At the end of the day, modern philanthropy wasn't actually invented to solve your problems. Modern philanthropy was invented to create tax shelters for wealthy people who don't actually care about what you want. And I'm not saying that foundations and philanthropists and folks who are giving now have not lived beyond that and are building authentic relationships and are thinking about it, but it's not built for you. St. Jude, when I go to the movies, it's a commercial for St. Jude before Denzel comes on the screen. You know what I'm saying? So the question is not how you can compete with St. Jude, because the answer is you can't. Because we live in a hyper-capitalist society that cares about Hollywood and branding more than it cares about Black people's mental health, and that's just what it is. The question is, how are you going to innovate around how you get money and stop trying to raise money like St. Jude, because it's never going to be for you. So who are you building relationships with? Who are you galvanizing with? How are you building your own access to wealth and to sustainable wealth, right? And how are you finding people who will help you do things that you don't need to pay them for? Because at the end of the day, it's about community care. And also, keep up your abundance practice. Because what I also find, this is so controversial, oh my God. What I also find is like, lack of access to capital breeds lack of access to capital. Because at some point, we actually don't believe either that we deserve, or even if we're like, of course I deserve, we don't believe it's ever going to happen because it ain't never happened. And so like you actually have to like, for me, my most powerful development work is my own spiritual, emotional work to remind myself that I'm worthy of the abundance I am building for the community that I care about, right? And that don't have nothing to do with St. Jude. I want St. Jude to get every bit of them $2 billion a year. I want the $2 billion too. And also, it's enough money out here for everybody to get $2 billion. Right? And so, to your point, right, it's like, how are we telling ourselves a different story so that the money builds and grows and is directed in a different way? We don't have to compete for dollars, y'all. It's like, what brand is say? $82 trillion sitting in assets in this country. $82 trillion sitting in assets, right? And because we have the Christian Community Foundation and the Community Foundation of Greater Memphis in the room, it's a lot of dollars sitting in DAFs. Sitting in DAFs. I have a friend who is a billionaire out on the West Coast who started a campaign called Half Your DAF to go around to community foundations around the country to convince fund holders to give away half the money in their DAF that is sitting there, not helping anyone, not helping you in your mental health program, or St. Jude for that matter, right? Because again, we're talking about tax shelters and finances and all those things. So like at some point, we're gonna have to do something different, because this what we're doing doesn't work. It doesn't work, or else we wouldn't be having this conversation.
And so what I wanted to mention was, I think that this is the place where you mentioned how do we build the kingdom, right? I come to this work in a former life. I was a professor of English, and I studied revolution and social change, Black power and yellow power, and people who wanted to burn it all down. And I did not forget that. So philanthropy in and of itself, its roots, its feet are dirty, right? And so I jokingly tell people when they ask what I do, sometimes I say I'm a money launderer. And so basically taking money that came out of this capitalist system and trying to do a little bit of good with it. And so when you ask the question, how do we do kingdom building? First and foremost, as we have said, as Shante said so eloquently, trust the people who are doing the work on the ground. Acknowledge their expertise. Treat them like they know what they're doing, because so often we condescend to them. They know what they're doing. Look, nobody's kids are coming to my house 3 and 4 days a week to ask me to do anything with them. Nobody's paying money to hear me sing or play anything. They have to pay money to watch me act, but that's neither here nor there. But in other words, those folks know what they're doing. They are attracting kids week in and month in and out over years. They know what they're doing. Michael Detroit knows what he is doing. You, Appleseed, know what you are doing. Tim Ware knows what he is doing when it comes to educating our young people. Trust them and then journey alongside them. And as you do it in a spirit of humility, observe what it is that they need. And then resource that. Not what you think they need, not another set of backpacks. Right? But if you watch, Tim is laughing because he's like, I got so many backpacks right now in the storage room, I can't give them away. Right? But if you watch him, and you go along behind him, what you might hear is that his teachers are burnt out. That's right. And maybe his teachers need a professional development fund. Maybe his teachers need a retreat. We just took our leaders on our second retreat. if you followed Michael Detroit and you listen to the people at Playhouse on the Square, what you might hear them say is, yeah, I have an internship, and I started out here as an internship, and you might hear them talk about how much or little money the internship is, but that's the fiscal reality. Maybe you fund that internship. So there's a better pathway for young people to go into, because y'all go to Playhouse on the Square. Fund the people who are doing the work behind the scenes that make that so amazing. You'll listen to the artists who are in the program at, through the Orpheum Theater Group, who are working out in the community, taking theater to the community as a way for people to lift their voices. Fund that. You can buy your ticket and go to the Broadway play, but fund those artists who are doing work to repair and heal in our community as well.
So we only have time for one more question. Just one more.
I can't get my question answered.
So I am Brittany Ivory. I am the board chairperson for Black Children's Books and Authors. Our mission is to let children know that our stories matter and let them see representation for themselves in literature. And so we have a Black author directory that our founder Stacey started years ago, and we've just evolved to this Books to You program. Shante, one thing that you mentioned was trusting the people, right? And finding those people that are already doing the work. So what type of recommendations are there, programs and things that help smaller organizations like us that only operate off of donations? We don't have capital. We have admin that we still have to pay. We have an executive director that still needs a salary. So what are recommendations? Are there programs that help coach us on how to get access to that type of funding and resources?
Well, I think you just made a really good appeal for creating kind of a consortium of folks like us who could support folks like you. I think you just really made a good case for it. And I think that's an appeal to the folks in the room. How do you think about really scaling these very small, passion-driven organizations to be able to do their work? And I don't have the answer yet, but hopefully Ariel's going to help us think about a way to maybe do that.
And I would also,
I want all of you guys to join us on the 23rd of September at our walkathon, because then you can also support us that way too.
but I would also mention Momentum, and their work. And the Assisi Foundation has their Before You Ask program, and that's what comes to the top of my mind. We have capacity building programs, Shante, that again, they're targeted towards the people that we are engaging as grantees. But those are two places to start.
That's my question. Your microphone. Yeah, because I've been holding up. My name is Dr. Callie Hurd. I'm the Vice President of the We All Be Group. Also volunteered a lot of times for the Women Foundation, and I know you too. I'm here because my son graduated from Washington University in St. Louis. And when he went to the John B. Irvin program, he changed his whole major around because he said God told him to educate Black people on how to love themselves. He gave up everything. We do our project, Jimmy Langton Project, which is a whole week festival. It's great. This year we're going to have it at the Holocaust Center. We also do the Fort Pillar Project, which is the 160th anniversary next year of the soldiers who got killed. We do African American history. We teach people how to learn their ancestry. Our problem is Memphis it's too cliquish. They don't help regular people. And we've been begging. And the only reason we get a lot of support because the old timers that are big, like Carla Thomas and all of them, they believe in us. So if you look at in-kind gift, we probably get about $1 million. But helping you don't work if you don't have money. So I thought about coming to this program, and I thought of philanthropist, because I also was the first chairperson of City Earths at FedEx. So I did a lot of community service. And the only thing I did, I told my kids I probably did wrong because I raised them from 2 years on up, giving back to the community. I didn't teach them how to become a philanthropist.
Because if they had became a philanthropist, they still would have been in the military and they could give people the money they really needed money. So my point is, if we're here tonight, and all we get is one little sheet, because I can't write, how do we get the information of how to get the money from other people to actually give us money?
So again, just to reiterate, if you're just getting started and you want to be plugged in a little bit more, there's momentum, and which provides capacity building, connecting, networking, and then the Assisi Foundations Before You Ask, that helps emerging nonprofits think through the kind of the fundamentals of what it takes to get started.
Thank you. We're going to wrap up and turn it over to Ariel, but I want to give Brandon and Shante a moment to just do a final closing thought, and then I'm going to let Rychetta have the last word.
Closing thought. Well, I thought, philanthropy is actually love in action. I don't know if there is a different word. I think so many of us here today do what we do because we love Memphis. I mean, that's why I do what I do, because I truly love this city. I am a Memphian by choice. When people think about, going off and they come back. Well, after college, I never left. I just stayed because I really believed in this city. And so I think just really figure out what is your love in action. Hopefully you leave today thinking a little deeper about what that could be. And I'll think too, what I could do different, more, deeper, whatever.
Yeah, I really appreciate this opportunity and really learned a lot from my fellow co-panelists here. If I'm leaving everyone with a message, it would certainly just be to think deeply and really understand the intent behind your giving, and if that intent is to create the most impact possible, then it's important to align that giving with those who are deeply engaged in the work and most intimately familiar with the challenges. And as a byproduct of that, that is often in this community Black-led organizations who have that experience. So I think there's a lot to be said for the power of Black-led, specifically intermediaries, to drive a lot of change, and just would love to leave you all with that thought.
So I'm going to ask Rychetta one last question, but I want to let you know that we are very grateful to the Community Foundation of Greater Memphis, and we are especially grateful to Ariel. About Ariel being hired, there was a Black woman email thread that went around, and we were like, "Girl, have you heard the news?" We were so excited. We're so excited about the work you're doing, and you know that we are all here to support you in your mission and your work, and we are here to do whatever you ask us to do all the time, forever and ever. I'm going to ask Rychetta a question, and the next voice you hear will be Ariel's. I'm so grateful for all of you for listening to me talk and ask questions. I hope to meet all of y'all afterwards. Okay, Rychetta. So Rychetta and I were having a conversation in preparation for this, and she said something to me that hit me in the chest. And I was like, don't answer this question, save it for the panel. So I don't actually know what she's going to say. We were talking about this idea of love, and folks who know me know that love is actually my jam. It's my core value. It's what I strive to be all the time. It is the thing I think about and talk about the most. And so being able to have a conversation about love and philanthropy is very exciting to me. And Rychetta said to me, love is not charity. Take it away. So she was like, well, what do you mean by that? And then she was like, well, don't answer it. Wait until tomorrow. And so they gave me time to reflect on it and think about it. And what do I mean by that? I'm not trying to get into a theological debate, right? So, but what we know is that charity is one aspect of love, right? In English, unfortunately, we just have that one word, right? But coming from the Greek, there were multiple.
And so we forget that though when we think about, when we make the translation to charity and philanthropy, right? And so then we think there's only one way to give, right? We give to the need. We give the backpacks, right? We give the check to St. Jude because there's this, it's such a compelling mission. But as Brandon is calling our attention to, there are creative, innovative ways to give that, as Anasa has called out, that we have all called out in our own way, can build assets and wealth for our community, grow the pie, not just move the pieces around the board. And I think that's what all of us are hoping. That's the direction we would love the conversation to evolve. How can we give in a way that creates assets in our community and use that as the foundation for wealth? So what I meant by love is not charity is that there is more than one way for us to give. And as Black people, we need to, Sankofa, look back to the past. As African people, we have always given to the collective, as Anasa said. We always have. That is how we are survived and why we are here today. And so how do we now collectively think about how we resource our communities? The thing about Memphis is when you're in a poor city, your money can go a long way if you direct it to the right things. We have giving circles, we have benevolent societies, we have civic organizations, we have fraternities and sororities. And we have been doing this here in America, but long before we came to America. So if we remembered who we are and what our heritage and history has given us, and use those strategies to bundle our money together, we can build that starship to take Black folks into the future. And for those of you who are here tonight, one of the ways that I was thinking about, how does this very often practically, where the rubber meets the road, is on boards for these nonprofits. Goodness gracious, if I had that wand, I would probably do away with 97.5% of the boards for nonprofits. So one way that you can also concretely think about how you give creatively and innovatively with your time, when it comes to board service, educate yourself before you get on the board. We're starting a board initiative where we're going to be doing that with creative organizations. So if you're really interested, hit me up and let me know afterwards. But if you just have that mindset that it's not about charity, right? It's about how are you using your talents to resource organizations. That's board work. It's not just about checking off a box. It's not just about the accolades and the attention and the profile that it gives you. You're working in a different form. And so if we think creatively and innovatively about how we give through different types of capital, through our service, in addition to cutting the check, then it'll get us a long way towards that Black future that we all imagine.
Thank y'all so much for coming out tonight. I always say that Dr. Rychetta Watkins is always the smartest person in the room. She was one of my first employers, so she's always the smartest person in the room and always gives us a gem to leave on. For me, this is what Black Philanthropy looks like, right? It looks like this amazing panel. Shante had an annual meeting this morning. Anasa's been my sounding board all week. Brandon is extremely amazing and brought a lot of thought. So it looks like that. It looks like, it looks like Mr. Fred and Miss Dorothy over there who've been long-time donors at the foundation and continue to give and inspire us all to continue to give in various ways. It looks like the nonprofit organizations, they have been supporting me, y'all, all week long. So to Tim Ware, to Camille, to Justin, and to Nikki, all the people who've been coming to event after event to have conversation, I really appreciate it. And especially looks like my partner in crime, Rachel Knox, who's also been supporting me throughout the month of August. So, I appreciate that. And it looks like the people who employ me, right? So 3 years ago, I wanted to start talking about Black philanthropy, and every time they can get behind me, they get behind me, and they support me 100%, and getting these conversations in Rome and convening great people to make sure that these things are top of mind and amplifying the voices of people on the panel, people in the room, people on video. So I have to acknowledge them and the amazing staff at the Community Foundation. You'll hear more from us. Look for, ways to connect with us past August and lift up Black philanthropy, but also just lift up philanthropy in our community in general. And like, Dr. Watkins was saying, think of creatively about the ways that you can give. Thanks so much for joining us tonight. Y'all have a great night.